All right, everyone. Today we're going to walk through some really important new findings about the horseshoe crab populations over in West Kalimantan's Mempawah Mangrove Park. This is some crucial data that's going to help us with our conservation work, so let's just dive right in. So, to get us all on the same page, let's remember what we're talking about here. This isn't just any animal. It's a living fossil, a creature that's been swimming in our waters for literally hundreds of millions of years. And, most importantly for our work, it is a fully protected species right here in Indonesia. That protected status is exactly why this kind of new local data is so incredibly valuable.
Here's how we'll break this down. First, we'll touch on that protected status. Then we'll get into the key findings from Mempawah Mangrove Park. After that, we'll properly meet the 3 species they found, then unravel this really interesting story of 2 different habitats, and finally, we'll talk about what this all means for conservation.
Okay, first things first, let's start with the legal framework that we're all operating within. So, as you know, horseshoe crabs have been protected in Indonesia for quite some time now. But here's what's really interesting. On an international level, the IUCN, that's the International Union for Conservation of Nature, actually lists them as data deficient. Now, that doesn't mean they're not in trouble. It means we just don't have enough solid information to know how much trouble they're in. And that right there is why these local studies are not just helpful, they're absolutely critical. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter, the new findings from Mempawah Mangrove Park, or MMP. This is really the first solid scientific look at this particular population.
To give you your bearings, the research all took place right here, in the coastal waters of the MMP in West Kalimantan. And as you can see, it's a very specific kind of ecosystem. And honestly, its unique features are the key to this whole story.
So what did they actually find? Well, this chart is the big takeaway. The researchers identified 3 species, sure, but look at these numbers. It's a blowout. They found 30 individuals of one species, Carcinoscorpius rotundicauda, but only 6 of another and just a tiny 3 of the third. This huge imbalance, this dominance of one species, is really the central mystery we need to solve.
You might be wondering, how did they even find these crabs? Well, it turns out they're mostly found as accidental bycatch when local fishermen are out looking for shrimp. Now, according to the study, the fishermen usually just toss them back. There's not much of a local market for them. But this interaction is really our main window into understanding the population here.
All right, now that we have the numbers, let's actually meet the 3 players in this story.
First up, we've got Tachyplius gigas. As we saw on that chart, this one's pretty hard to come by in the park. In fact, only 3 were found over the entire 5-month study period. Just 3.
Then we have its cousin, Tachyplius tridentatus. They found a few more of these, 6 in total, but they weren't consistently there. They just sort of popped up here and there between April and August.
And finally, here's our main character, Carcinoscorpius rotundicauda. And really, its common name is a massive clue, isn't it? The mangrove horseshoe crab. That name tells you almost everything you need to know about why it's thriving here.
So that's the big question, right? Why is one species so common while the other 2 are barely there? Well, it all comes down to a tale of 2 habitats. The answer is in the environment itself.
This slide lays it all out perfectly. On the one hand, you have the mangrove specialist. It loves mangrove areas with that soft, muddy bottom, which is a perfect description of Mempawah Mangrove Park. So for this species, the habitat is ideal. But on the other hand, you've got the other 2, the Tachyplius species. They're sandy beach seekers. They need sandy beaches to really live and reproduce. So for them, the habitat suitability in the park is, well, it's very, very low.
And look, you don't have to take my word for it. The researchers spell it out directly. This quote from their paper basically says, both of these species prefer sandy beach habitats, so it is indeed not an ideal habitat for the Tachyplius genus. It's a classic case of right species, wrong address.
Okay, so we know what's happening and why it's happening. The big question for us is, what do we do about it? This is where the science turns into strategy.
To really understand the path forward, we need to wrap our heads around this idea of a specialized habitat. The MMP isn't just any old piece of coastline. Its unique character, that muddy, mangrove-rich environment, makes it a perfect home for a specialist, while being a pretty tough place for others to live. So let's boil this all down into some clear takeaways for management. Number 1, we can now say with scientific confidence that the Mempawah Mangrove Park is a critical habitat for the protected mangrove horseshoe crab. Number 2, it's the mangroves and the mud. Those are the features we absolutely have to protect to keep this population healthy. And third,
Even though the other two species are rare, the fact that they're there at all tells us this area is important for the broader ecosystem, maybe for migration or spawning. All of this means our conservation plans have to be tailored to these very specific conditions.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to guide our next steps. Now that we know the MMP is fundamentally a specialist's habitat, how should we focus our conservation priorities to give the best possible protection to its unique and very important population? Thank you.